I have a special guest today, Ralph, over 20 years of experience, multi-entrepreneur, co-founder of Purple Horizons. Thank you for joining me today, Ralph.
My pleasure, David. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Appreciate it. Well, just to get into it, what is Purple Horizons and why did you co-found it?
Interesting. Purple Horizons is as much of a movement and a framework as it is a company. So my business partner, Gianni Dillard, and I started Purple Horizons about 18 months ago. And the premise of Purple Horizons is thinking of it as a framework similar to like the Blue Ocean strategy. Very well known business book and business framework. We wanted to think about technology in the same way that the Blue Ocean strategy thinks about business, right? What are these major shifts in technology, and how can companies leverage this technology that's available to us and constantly evolving to be able to level up their businesses? So we started thinking about the way that businesses could actually structure these frameworks. And that's where we came up with the concept of Purple Horizons. Everybody knows what the golden hour is. In the afternoon, as the sun is setting, just as the sun breaks the plane of the horizon, as it's setting, you get this orange flash and then it's gone. Similarly, when the sun is rising, you get this purple flash as it breaks the plane of the horizon. So the way we like to think about Purple Horizons is like we're always looking out into the horizon, looking out to see what's next. And that's that flash of inspiration and innovation that we're all looking for.
Wow, that's a good way of thinking of it. First off, that's a cool name, and now that you described it, it's even better.
Thank
Um,
you.
so knowing with technology, and you founded a few companies over the last 20 years, being the co-founder, and this one's a newer 18 months. What are some of the business strategies that you didn't expect, or some of the pitfalls that you didn't expect in today?
Speed of innovation. We've been around. So another way of thinking of a Purple Horizon are like these seismic shifts in technology. So if we think back to like the automobile, that's a Purple Horizon. If you think of the internet, that's a Purple Horizon. If you think of mobile phone technology, that's a Purple Horizon. And now we're living through the era of AI. And that's most definitely a Purple Horizon, and one that's moving so quickly. When we started Purple Horizons, we were doing a lot of things in the blockchain space, starting to really scratch the surface of AI. And this was like pre GPT release to the public 2 years ago. And we were starting to see a lot of the work that OpenAI was doing, and we knew that it was going to be transformational. I don't think we were prepared for just how transformational it was going to be and how quickly things are moving. So we're like our clients, we're having to catch up and stay abreast of everything that's going on. And the other thing that's been surprising to us is changing roles. I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more of. Like now we see back end devs doing front end work, and we see marketers doing prototypes of apps. There's this crazy shift of roles within the space that we're still trying to embrace. But I would say those are the two biggest challenges that we face so far.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this AI, what we call a bubble, but it's been so fast upon us, and technology, that speed is just getting there. What are you seeing next 2, 3 years? Because obviously we can't talk about 3 to 5 because it's just going so fast.
No, that's the interesting thing, right? So before I dive into that, like one of the things that we've had to do with clients is just education. Like that was a surprising thing for our business. Like we thought that we were going to be like getting our hands dirty and rolling up our sleeves in helping innovate and create all these incredible solutions, and we are. But at the same time, we're having to catch up our clients' teams on what's going on, and we've become almost an educational resource for them. So that's been surprising. But who knows? I mean, think about it. Some of the technology that we're seeing today, David, and you and I have talked about this offline, didn't even exist 18 months ago. Some of it didn't exist last Monday, right? So uh, I'm not a coder by nature, even though I have started several dev shops and iOS development platforms. Actually, fun fact, I was one of the first 100 developers in the iOS ecosystem. Uh, so been around code, comfortable around code, but not a coder. And AI has helped me launch my own apps, launch MVPs. And sometimes like it'll take me 2 or 3 days to do it. And the following day, after like deploying and being super happy, a new tool comes out and I can do the same thing in about 10 minutes. So the sky's the limit. I mean, I think what we are seeing, if I had to like break it down to two things, one is conversation and conversational UI UX is going to be at the forefront of everything. Effective communication is going to be very important uh, to builders and company management and leaders and founders, because that is the future of UI UX. I believe, we believe, and we're working with our clients to make sure that they're ready for that. And the other thing is to stay curious. I mean, you have to be tinkering. If somebody on your team is not tinkering, you are falling behind. They are falling behind. You have to encourage, as a business leader, you have to encourage that level of curiosity and tinkering within your ranks.
Well, yeah, I think the curiosity is very key. The UI UX, obviously, that's something that we all, especially in the Western world, is that if it's not cool looking, if it's not what we call sexy, I think that people just pass it on. So,
Right.
knowing that that AI is going, do you foresee any pitfalls with it? Because I think we looked at some of the governance that needs to be put in place. Are you seeing the same thing?
We're definitely seeing the same thing. We have clients that are in the ed tech space. So we're working with clients that are essentially molding the future leaders, and they're challenged with how do we make AI first citizens of the world. Ethics is a big part of that. Privacy, legalities, copyright. There's still a lot of things that are being written today. So being part of that conversation, helping to shape that is important. But there's still a lot of privacy concerns. Every day this morning I was reading about technology where they're scanning not only your license plates, but they're also scanning your yard signs. Like, we recently saw the example of the Harvard students with the meta glasses that were able to essentially dox anybody who was walking towards them on a sidewalk. That's stuff that really needs to, I'm not a fan of overregulation, but these are things that we really need to be looking at and are important.
Yeah, there's sometimes that you look at the technology, how fast it's growing, and it can be a big hindrance, especially if you don't put those governance in place. And like you just said, I have never even thought about those smart glasses that are looking at signs, and if you political way one or the other way, um, they're gonna dox you or have that information that this is a house and everyone who lives in here, it's easy. You can look up who owns the home and so forth.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, fun story around the home example that you just gave. Recently read how the Australian Broadcast Corporation, the ABC, it's the equivalent of the BBC, but in Australia, they hacked one of the iRobot vacuums, and they hacked into the camera. So they were able to show how through the camera they were monitoring like the house where the robot was in, which is absolutely crazy, right? Like, what are the limits to that? How do we protect consumers? And how do we protect company data, right? That's really important. In the space that you work in and in the space that I work in, uh, private data is very important. So just making sure that we're making smart decisions around the data is going to be key.
Yeah, that security is very key. That we definitely have to wrap it around and then make sure that our government is protecting us and the data that we have, because it's very easy for another nation that is a foreign adversary to get a hold of that. So, um,
Absolutely.
as we switch gears into your personal self, like how did you become an entrepreneur? Like what was it that drove you to this? Because I mean you've been an entrepreneur for the last 12, 14 years.
Actually, I've been an entrepreneur for much longer than that. My entrepreneurial endeavors and spirit started at the ripe old age of 13. I was a mobile DJ. My neighbors across the street, older boys, ran a mobile DJ company. When they went off to college, I was inspired to kind of carry on their legacy. And that was my first taste of making money. I'll never forget. I had two other DJ partners at 13, and we DJed our first party, and we were paid $60. Uh, which we split three ways, 20, 20, and 20. And I was just awestruck that I could do something that I absolutely loved and get paid for it. And after that, I was hooked. And while I've spent the bulk of my career on the entrepreneurial path, I did spend a fair amount of time in the corporate world, and all of these lessons that I took from starting businesses so early and succeeding and failing have been instrumental in who I am today.
Wow, 13 and being a DJ. What I've learned actually by doing this podcast, I've learned a lot of people who are artistic and also into music go into engineering and so forth, which is mind blowing. But it kind of makes sense when you start tinkering with things, and music is the same way. It's like, how do you find your sound? How do you find your actual engineering? What part do you want to be part of?
Exactly. Look, it taught me a lot about sales and marketing, even, right? Like my job as a DJ was to keep crowds motivated, to keep them moving. So understanding what drives people, what gets them excited, what gets them moving, what causes them, to move this way or move that way. Those were all lessons that later on in life I was able to apply and still apply to this day.
That's really cool to hear. Now you touched a little bit that you had some of your failures. What's some of two-part question? What's some of your personal failures, but also business failures?
I would combine them both into the same, because my businesses are an extension of who I am. I would say that the biggest failure was seeing one of our startups fizzle, and not making the decision to shutter it earlier. Lost tons of money, sleepless nights. It was tremendously taxing on my health, both physical and mental and emotional. It was hard on my family. Um, and it was like all of the data supported shutting it down. I let the emotions get the best of me. And you know was it hard? Absolutely. Was it one of the best lessons I could have ever learned? Absolutely. Because it now I look through that lens and understand when something needs to pivot, when something needs to change. I mentioned earlier we were doing a lot of things in blockchain. A lot of our customers were starting to see a shift coming, and had I not been able to apply those lessons of being able to shift and pivot quickly, I don't know that we'd be as successful as we are today in having shifted over to machine learning and AI and all of the other things that we're doing right now.
I love to hear that's one of your biggest failures in life is something that you decided not to stop early enough. You let the emotional part of it, and in business, you kind of have to have the emotional part to it, because you're working with clients that depend on you. You're working with people, and that human element means something to you. Um, so I love that part of it. Now, when we talk about that personal life, did you have any mentorships or mentors?
Absolutely. So I have not just one mentor. I have several mentors in different areas of my life. I have business mentors. I have my kids as mentors, right? I have two older boys, young men. But I look at them as my cultural mentors, right? I like to be plugged into what's going on. You have to be. I mentioned curiosity earlier. I'm very curious. I'm always asking, what networks are they on? What are they talking about? What are the trends? That's how we were able to spot, this movement. Like, you're starting to hear rumblings now about Generation Alpha and how to market to Generation Alpha and what's important to them. And they're really going to be the first kind of AI native um, generation. But I know that, and I'm plugged into that because of my kids as mentors. I have several business mentors. I have life mentors. I have health mentors, right? People who I look up to and help to, help me to stay on track and make sure that I'm hitting my health goals and I'm not deteriorating physically or emotionally. Because running a business and running a startup is hard. There's it's an emotional roller coaster. You have to be prepared for it. You have to be healthy for it.
Yeah, well, the fact that you have multiple mentorships and you obviously subscribe to that mentorship, how did you get the mentor? And your kids obviously is proxy. That's something that you are willing to learn from everybody that's around you. But actually going out as, say, I'm into the industry and I really need a mentor, what would your suggestion be?
So that's twofold. One, when I was younger and I really didn't have access to an incredible network of people, I started with kind of virtual mentors. I decided that there were several authors or influencers or people that I wanted to follow, and I just said to myself, this is my mentor. Tony Robbins was a big mentor to me, whether he knows it or not. But it's important to be able to say, like, sometimes you don't know exactly who that mentor could be. Sometimes it's a client, and you can't be afraid to reach out. I mentor a lot of people. I take pride in that. I think it's important to be able to give back and share my life experiences. But a lot of times, I'll look to somebody who I aspire to be, or somebody who's in a space that I want to be in, and I will approach them and I will ask politely, look, I'd love to be mentored by you. I'd love to support you in any way that I can. Spend an hour, half an hour, 15 minutes, whatever you can give me. And I'm prepared to, when I come into a conversation with that person, it's not about wasting their time. It's really about being able to take from them what I need to be able to level up, but at the same time be able to and be prepared to serve them in a way that the relationship is mutually beneficial.
Awesome. Now, when we look at that mentorship, what are like the top three things that you going into someone say, hey, Ralph, I need a mentor in business, what you're doing currently at Purple Horizons? What are the top three things that you would have someone do on a daily basis?
Well, number one is take action. I believe that a lot of times people will ask for advice and then not take action on that advice. I tend to favor working with and helping people who are over the top action takers. If they're not taking action every single day, regardless of how they're feeling, that's a red flag for me. And I say that right up front when somebody wants to lean on me in a mentor mentee kind of relationship. Is I value action over anything else. Curiosity. We've thrown that word a lot during this podcast, but they have to be curious. They have to be willing to learn and explore, and they have to check their ego at the door. Ego is the worst thing that can happen to somebody, right? Everybody starts to get wrapped up in what are other people going to think? What if I fail? What if all of these things happen? Those what ifs, you have to check that ego at the door because we talked about this journey being like a roller coaster full of ups and downs. Your ego has to be in check to be able to handle that.
I love that you mentioned ego because ego gets in the way of everything in today's, and that's based off of marketing and how things are positioned in our society today. Now, has that been something that actually you found through some of your failures, or is that something that you always believe that, hey, I don't really care what anyone thinks?
It is actually in that particular example that I gave earlier of that business that fizzled. I had come off of a string of successes, and I was seeing this business like spiraling to the ground. And in my head, I started thinking, oh my God, what are people going to think? This is like such a huge miss. I just came off of all of these great wins. Like, what's going to happen now? And I had to check myself. And thankfully, with one of my mentors, he asked me a question that I don't think enough people ask themselves. And it's just become a part of my routine, and a question that when I work with mentees, I always ask them, what's the worst that can happen? Right? What's the worst that can happen? Let's break that down for a second, David, right? Are you going to go homeless? Probably not. There's a family member, a friend, a colleague, someone who's going to give you, I mean, there's even shelters, right? Talk about checking your ego at the door, right? Chances are you're not going to go homeless. You're going to have a roof over your head. Are you going to go hungry? Probably not, because those same people that can offer you a roof could probably offer you a plate of food. And if all else fails, during that time, I was doing some math because I'm a numbers guy. I found out that for less than $300 for an entire year, you can eat ramen, instant ramen, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. So if you can't come up with $300, like, you could do that working a week at Walmart or anywhere. And I'm not degrading Walmart. I'm saying it's not that difficult to come up with $300. So you're fed for a year. So if that's really the worst that can happen, other than dying, right? Like, if you ask what's the worst that can happen, I could die. Maybe you don't want to do that, but you're not going to die. You're not going to go homeless, and you're not going to go hungry. The worst thing that can happen is that your ego gets hurt. And that's why I think it's so important to check your ego at the door.
That's great. And when the young kids hear this, and that's something that I actually tell my nieces and nephews, is that your ego is the one thing that's going to be the downfall for you.
Yeah.
Um, Caring about what other people think about you is going to be the worst thing about you.
Yep.
Obviously, if you do the things the right way, you appreciate the things that you do have, and you also respect the other person. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters.
So I really love that part, that you are able to get across to other people. Now, as we get ready to wrap up things, I always ask, what are some of the books that you would suggest reading, if I'm trying to get into, you have marketing experience, you have IT experience. What are some of the personal readings that you always suggest?
So it's interesting because I can give you three of my favorite books that have nothing to do with business, have everything to do with mindset, but that like flows right into everything that you do in your life, including your business. So one is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. David
Mhm.
Goggins is an absolute beast. Here's a guy who failed at being a Navy SEAL. He tried and tried again, got it. He's one of the most mentally intense people on this planet. And that book really helps with the whole process of checking your ego at the door. The next two really come down to habits and to doing the hard things and to really fostering that mentality of taking action. Atomic Habits by James Clear, and which is great. It's really about developing these like good habits and repeating them over and over again. And the third one is Make Your Bed. I think it's Make Your Bed, like the little things that can change your life and the world. It's by an admiral, William McRaven. Great book. And it really is about risk taking. It's about doing things, about being consistent, and doing the things that you can control. So those are three that I absolutely love. There's two more that are really more business related. So I guess back to your original question, one I read recently. It's a fairly new book, which I've been recommending to a lot of people lately. It's called Never Enough by Andrew Wilkinson. Andrew Wilkinson is a kick-ass entrepreneur. He's kind of like the Warren Buffett of the internet space. He buys these little internet companies, super consistent, but he's grown it into a multi-billion-dollar empire. He's an entrepreneur out of Canada. Great book, for entrepreneurs. Highly recommend it. And then one that's a fun read. It's a piece of fiction. It was written years and years ago, probably 20 years ago, and it's called Damon by Daniel Suarez. Or I mean, it's actually spelled. It's pronounced demon, but it's Daemon. It's fun. It's eye opening. It's a fun and eye opening tech read. It kind of makes you, in the AI world that we're in, it makes you go, whoa, like this could actually really happen. But definitely worth a read if you're into tech and you're into fiction.
Wow, like just some of the things that the concepts that you've talked about throughout this podcast. I know David Goggins, his whole story. I do know, one of the biggest things that I had from my mentor was the first thing you should ever do is make your bed when you get out of bed, no matter
Mhm.
what, because at least you have one thing accomplished.
It's a
You,
win.
it's a big win too, because when you go to bed, everyone loves a clean bed before they get in bed. So
Absolutely.
I love that. And then to throw in the tech side of things, those are all pretty big. And to learn from someone like yourself who has, a serial entrepreneur mindset, these things are very important for people both in the tech world and in the business world. And I really appreciate you giving me the knowledge to continue to pass on to the next generation. Um, as we get ready to wrap up, what is one thing during this podcast you wished I asked? Why?
Um, Actually, I wish you would have asked me what's the worst that can happen. We kind of went over that question, but um, It's interesting to me. I've thought many times of starting a podcast called "What's the Worst That Can Happen," and just ask entrepreneurs and ask people, what's the worst that can happen, and maybe they share their lowest point, or I applaud you because not a lot of people ask. Like everybody's like, oh, and you did this and you did that, like, but not many interviewers will venture into like, what was that low point? Like I think you learn so much more, or just as much from the losses as you do from the wins. So I think you hit it spot on.
I appreciate that. Yeah, the reason why I actually started this podcast is because I have a very unique background in the sense of where I grew up, how I grew up, and if you look at me now, you would never guess that that's even part of my life and upbringing. And that's why I love giving back to other people, and that
Amazing.
knowledge of knowing that we're all going to fail at something, and it just doesn't matter. It's just put one foot in front of the other. And the more that people realize that people like yourself, who've had lots of different businesses, have all the money in the world, and you still use these concepts to just get up and go. And we all are human.
We're all human.
So, and on that, as we wrap up, Ralph, thank you very much. I really appreciate you giving me your time today, and then stay safe during those hurricanes.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing for the community. This is amazing. And once again, appreciate you and everything you've done for it.
Appreciate it, Ralph. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you'll tune in next time. For more information on how we can help your business, check out our website at sigmaways.com. I'd love to hear your feedback. Please send me a message with any topic or questions you want me to cover. Also, if you're in the world of business and technology, I would love to have you as a guest. Please hit the like and subscribe button below and stay up to date on the next video. Once again, I'm David, and this is All Things Business and Technology. Cheers.